The Silent Hill series has always been one of the most recognizable franchises to grace the video game landscape. Compared to most horror games of the time that relied on traditional monster tropes and the supernatural, Silent Hill puts a much larger emphasis on psychological and existential horror. Fear of the unknown, unexplainable creatures, unreliable narratives, and convoluted mysteries are some of the hallmarks that define the Silent Hill series. While prevalent for over a decade since the first Silent Hill game was released, the series didn't see much attention over the past 10 years, especially after PT, which a lot of fans were sad to see, and PS4 sellers saw this as the greatest bundle cash grab opportunity of all time.
What the fuck?
But fans rejoiced when a remake by Team Blooper finally got Silent Hill 2 on modern day machines, and from what I've heard so far, it's pretty good. But the first Silent Hill still sits in the retro library of the PS1, and many fans consider it to be one of the best in the series. Unsettling locations, unreliable and mysterious characters, unexplainable monsters, and an atmosphere that you can't find anywhere else. Except maybe my favorite Silent Hill inspired love letter of all time, the first Silent Hill is an amazing horror game. Speaking personally, I grew up around Silent Hill games, but I never actually had the courage to play them, mainly because I always considered the series to be one of the scariest games of all time. But now after years of playing just about every modern horror game to date, I grew enough chest hair to finally step into the franchise. So, after 25 years, you guys feel old yet?
I've fallen, and I can't get up!
A countless number of awesome horror games that have pushed and evolved the genre forward, and James Sunderland now viewable in 4K, how does the father of psychological horror games still play after all this time? Well, let's find out with a retrospective review on Silent Hill. The story of Silent Hill goes like this. Harry Mason is on a vacation trip with his adoptive daughter Cheryl when a young figure in the middle of the road causes Harry to swerve into a car crash. A few moments later, Harry finds himself in the mysterious town of Silent Hill with his daughter lost somewhere in the fog. Upon investigation, things are not what they seem, and Harry's situation takes a turn for the worst.
Hi.
The town of Silent Hill has something far more sinister going on, with Harry and his daughter being caught in its web. It's a story of a father desperately trying to find his daughter, and Harry has to contend with all manners of individuals and creatures present in Silent Hill. It's a very good story, and one that isn't overly reliant on dialogue and conversations to reveal it, but more so with its themes and character juxtaposition. The game is also very good about revealing the story through its setting as well, as many of the different levels have very appropriate reasons for existing, other than for the sake of making you shit your pants.
Nope.
The story points are also well placed too, and one of the best I've seen at revealing plot points and maintaining its intrigue up until the ending of the game. Before I continue further though, I will be talking about potential spoilers, so please skip here if you would prefer to avoid any. But here's also some summary points to show you what I generally think of Silent Hill's story. Alright, talking about the setting first, Silent Hill is a very simple but mysterious setting that harbors a dark secret at its core. What I think is great about this concept is how it ultimately unravels through Harry's adventure to find his daughter, as he learns more about why Silent Hill is the way that it is, and why his daughter has a connection to the town. There's a lot more to it too, like why monsters are the way they look, and why key locations end up becoming darker versions of themselves. There's a lot of key themes and motifs in the setting that eventually play back to very important characters of the story, specifically Alessa and her unfortunate and forced involvement in the town. When talking about Harry though, he's basically an everyday man, and there's nothing in particular about his personality and disposition that make him unique. Though he does know how to handle firearms pretty well, and he doesn't need a PhD for that. Looking at you, Gordon. Despite Harry bordering on disbelief as to whether he is caught in a bad dream or not, his need to find his daughter is motivation enough to drive him forward, and it's what keeps him calm and sane despite the nature of the things around him. His character does feel very one-dimensional, but in a good way actually, as it foils his character to the setting as well as the other characters of Silent Hill. He is simply a motivated father who will stop at nothing to get his daughter back, and that's what I like about his personality. Even when other characters give him advice on where to go, he almost accepts it without any resistance, which is an interesting flaw in his nature, and speaks volumes about his status as a father. He still acts as a good guy when he can, but only up to certain points. The other characters are also the stars of the story. Sybil acts as the only other source of relief for Harry, Delilah is deranged, but is Harry's best source of information to his daughter's whereabouts, Lisa is troubled, but provides another source of relief for Harry as well, including her own insights into the town. The characters help provide a sense of identity for the town's being, and the story does an amazing job of tying them all together. If I have to pick my personal favorite out of every character in the game, it's definitely Lisa, because of how tragic her character is and her involvement with Alessa. The first time you meet her, she comes off as a scared young nurse who doesn't know what's going on, and so it creates this sense of doubt and intrigue with her character. But as she slowly remembers what her involvement was, she becomes a tragic character that bridges Alessa's involvement with the cult. Her realization that she's simply a manifestation of Alessa's memories frightens her, and she is slowly unraveled. What makes the end of her story even more tragic is how Harry is frightened by her as he leaves the room in fear of what she is. It's a very sad story, but one that is well written and brings some emotional reveals and closure to her and Alessa. Lisa also has the saddest song that you'll ever hear in pretty much any video game format. All in all, a very good story with some good mystery as well, which will keep players intrigued up until the end of the game. On the gameplay front, this is 3D survival horror at its most primal, and classic Silent Hill is built upon the foundation of limited item usage and tank controls.
No.
Now, if you're of the opinion that tank controls should be put into the dirt because of how horrendously sluggish and bad it feels to play, which I don't entirely disagree with, the tank controls in Silent Hill didn't feel completely bad at all. Maybe it's just because I'm so used to playing a whole bunch of old Resident Evil titles, but the pacing of the game never made me feel like I was fighting the controls. For the most part. There are some pretty tight turns in certain sections that you have to make, and either standing to actually physically turn, or running in a large arc just to catch the pathway is pretty awkward. But when it came to combating enemies combined with Silent Hill's camera system, more on that in a sec, the tank controls there felt natural to use. I would say with the game's difficulty, the majority of players would be alright with these controls, but when it comes to running and dodging enemies in tight spaces, as well as you beautiful speedrunners out there who need to optimize this game, then getting good at tank controls becomes important.
Oh no!
The camera is definitely a unique hallmark of the classic Silent Hill series. It has a very dynamic movement that's meant to emphasize the atmosphere of the game. It's often hovering above the player in order to get a sense of the environment that the players are in. For combat and general gameplay, it may feel awkward for some players, but I personally loved it actually. Since Silent Hill's gameplay is purposely tanky, simple, and slow, the camera system is meant to emphasize the tense and dark atmosphere of the game, so I'm willing to take a hit on controls if it means making the game look a lot scarier. And oh boy, does it do a good job. Enemies entering the screen from the foreground while Harry prepares himself for combat is a unique and terrifying feeling that only Silent Hill can convey. In terms of system mechanics, Harry has a basic set of weapons that eventually grows into a wider arsenal that he can use for combat. In traditional survival horror format, you get a limited number of ammo and health items in order to manage your survivability. Though I did find Silent Hill to be very easy actually, at least in terms of going around and collecting as many items as possible, since Silent Hill has no limit on how much you can carry. So if you have a bit of a hoarder mentality in games, and you're trying to go for 100% completion, this might actually be easy for you. Though that's assuming you're not wasting your bullets on every enemy, and you're not everyone's punching bag. I'd say the combat was fun, especially for classical survival horror standards, where it was enough to help defend against the scary cast of monsters when I needed to. Though I do think items like the hammer felt a little too overpowered, and I could basically position myself to kill enemies very easily without wasting resources. But I'm sure a lot of different players will have different gameplay styles than mine, which means their mileage may vary with how easy this game is, but I could at least say that I had a lot of fun either combating the enemies or running away from them.
Nope.
The game also boasts a good number of puzzles that you can solve. Some are pretty simple in terms of approach, like finding a key or multiple keys to unlock a door, while others sometimes feel like you have to open your third eye just to solve them. I would say overall, they were definitely a brain teaser, and there may be a few that could leave you stuck, or you'd have to consult the internet in order to bypass them. One search puzzle that I didn't particularly like was having to find a total of 3 keys around the area of Old Silent Hill just to open up a door behind the house. It's not difficult by any means, but the fact that you have to basically scour the map in order to find these keys in locations that have no relation to the house feels a little obtuse. Oh, and there is one item puzzle that made me literally scream, "What the f?" which was the room where you have to get a dagger, but also use a ring in order to lock a creature from instantly killing you. At first, I thought this was a cutscene, but as soon as I saw the game over title, I couldn't hold it in. Wait, what the fuck? I'd say the puzzles in Silent Hill were fun brain teasers, and I did have to think about some of them. Others do feel a little obtuse, so I wouldn't fault you if you had to look up a guide. On the presentation side, the graphics are basically going to decide whether this particular game holds up for you. Since this is a PS1 game, you have the classic pixelated 3D models, with the concept of anti-aliasing being non-existent. You either love it or hate it, and if you need something a little more modern, well, good thing the remake for 2 got released. But if you like retro aesthetics, Silent Hill 1 will really scratch that PS1 era graphical itch. I'm actually of the opinion that the graphics stood the test of time, because I really like how Silent Hill's aesthetic with the PS1 hardware actually adds to the game's scariness. The misshapen creatures and the otherworld environment feel way more visceral and gross thanks to the older generation hardware. Though in terms of performance, the game does struggle to run at a consistent, I believe, 30 frames per second, and sometimes the game would even dip way below that when certain levels were loaded in. Since this isn't a fast-paced game, nor does it require the most fast reaction times, I was completely fine with the lower frame rate. I think the most impressive aspect for the game's graphics though is the lighting system. In darkly lit areas, especially in the other world, your flashlight is the only real light source, and it can be very terrifying when you're traversing small corridors only for objects and enemies to appear once your flashlight illuminates them. It's extremely impressive for a game of 1999, and this is honestly the reason why I was too scared to play it back in the day. Silent Hill knew how to make dark and dilapidated areas terrifying, and they still scare to this day. The sound design is easily one of the best you will hear in any video game format, and hearing it properly for the first time left me very impressed. The game is very good about picking what music should be present in almost every mood. The most stellar set pieces, though, are the moments where enemies and combat are present. The oppressive, industrial, and cold sounds really makes the tone of these encounters very harsh and uncomfortable. The game is also very good about limiting its use of music and emphasizing silence or sound effects from many different sources. The famous radio noise when enemies are near is very iconic and even scarier when you have to contend with enemies that are waiting just around the corner. When silence is involved, and all you hear is the sound of Harry's footsteps, it makes for a very tense atmosphere, putting you on edge as you hope no other sounds are made. In terms of voice acting technicalities, I say it's pretty good, but also pretty weird sounding at the same time. I've heard from different sources that the voice acting is intentionally done this way in order to force characters to sound stiff and awkward. Whether intentional or not, The characters do lack a bit of natural nuance to them in most of the dialogue that occurs in this game.
How do you feel?
Oh, like I've been run over by a truck. But I'm alright, I guess.
Regardless, it's a very unique voice acting direction, and it feels very Silent Hill-esque.
All I ask.
So, after looking at Silent Hill again, how does the game fare after 25 years? Pretty damn good, honestly. While there are games that also emphasize a similar psychological experience, and even some that are inspired by Silent Hill itself, the first Silent Hill game is still a unique horror experience that has stood the test of time. Of course, it's still the same game that came out 25 years ago, so the general gameplay, as well as the graphics, may not be for everyone wanting to come back to an older title, especially since it hasn't been re-released on modern platforms. But if you're willing to work with a bit of datedness, Silent Hill is a must-try experience. I think when it comes to the horror genre, world building and atmosphere are the core foundations of what makes a good horror game, which is what Silent Hill still does. Despite the 25-year gap, the game holds up very well after all this time, and fingers crossed, we get a really good remake of it. But that's it for today, guys. Thanks for sticking around. There will be more games to play and more videos coming soon, so please stay tuned if you'd like to see more. For now, I'll see you all next time.